Hello there, I'm the Marvel Master here with a video pitching how I would make a Fantastic Four trilogy in a universe where Marvel has the film rights to all of their characters. I'm a bit ill, so my voice may fluctuate at times, but hopefully it should be fine. As you can see by the schematic on screen, in a separate video I've already gone over how a Spider-Man trilogy would fit into Act 1 of my Marvel movie universe, or MMU for short. I would recommend watching that before watching this video, as there are very minor spoilers for that in this one, but if you've already seen the Spider-Man video, or don't care too much, feel free to watch on and comment your thoughts about the movies, as well as your favourite member of the Fantastic Four. The first movie is called Fantastic Four Twisted Strings, and would open with a house by the side of the road, basically in the middle of nowhere. We would see a man coming out of a porch door, telling someone over his shoulder that he's going to a studio, and we'd see him walk into a shed, which would be shown to be a pottery studio. Just to say, the man would have hair, but I couldn't find an image of him with hair. He would start to get to work, constructing something out of clay, when he would hear a large crash sound. The man would rush outside and towards the nearby field, where an escape pod of some sort has crash-landed. The air around it would shimmer and ripple with radiation, which he wouldn't notice until he got too close. The clay on his hands would glow as he would scream in agony and his hair would fall out. The camera would pan to the shuttle and it would fade to a montage of newspapers with headings such as 4 astronauts gain incredible powers and Space Mission Gone Awry, and then evolves into Fantastic Four Save the Day Again, before cutting to the title card. The main part of the movie would start with a battle between the Fantastic Four and an army of Moloids, being egged on by Mole Man. The heroes would be winning, so Mole Man would summon Giganto, who the four barely managed to take down, with Thing uttering a clobbering time sometime in the fight, as well as the iconic pose being replicated. Some crowds would cheer while others would shout and jeer, particularly at the Thing, and when he, Stu and Reed arrived back at the Baxter building, Reed would get a call about all of the damage that the fight had caused, and Mr. Fantastic would promise Ben that he is trying to find a way to fix him. By the way, Reed and Sue would be dating but not married. After the fight, Human Torch would have taken off and we'd see him flying around the city when he spots a man on top of a bridge, walking stiffly towards the edge. The camera would show someone in a large hat and trench coat, sitting on a bench nearby, holding a clay model of a man, and making him move along the armrest. The unknown person would push the figure off, and at the same time the man would jump off the edge. The figurine shatters on the floor, but Johnny saves the man from falling, angering the man on the bench. Johnny would ask the jumper his name, and he, who would be very confused and scared, would say Jacob Reese. The next noteworthy thing that would happen would be that we'd see a bank at night, when all of a sudden Human Torch bursts in and starts robbing it and setting everything ablaze before leaving. The same night, Ben would be at a bar on Yancey Street, but even there people would give him odd looks apart from the bartender, who's an old friend of his, and the bartender would introduce Ben to a blind woman called Alicia Masters, who doesn't mind Ben's condition. The next day, there would be crowds and police all around the base of the Baxter building, and we'd see Reed hooking up Johnny to a machine, and saying that there's some sort of latent psychic link in Johnny's brain. He would start to track it, but at that moment Johnny would flame on, and start trying to destroy everything, including the machine tracking the signal, and he'd succeed at that. Sue would be there and would throw up a force field around Johnny, and he would immediately stop and look confused. Throughout this, we would see the man from the bench, fiddling with a clay Human Torch figurine, in a room and looking through a window across the street at the Baxter building. When the force field was brought up, the head of the figurine would shatter, and the man is revealed to be the man from the start of the movie, and is the Fantastic Four villain, Puppet Master. Reed would then ban Johnny from leaving the Baxter building, especially without his sister. Alicia would have invited Thing to meet her stepfather, and when Ben arrived, the door would be opened by Philip Masters, aka Puppet Master, who is holding a figurine of Thing. Alicia would ask if Ben was there, and Philip would say she needs to be more careful about who she dates. We would see Sue leaving the Baxter building to go shopping, and she would have to go invisible to avoid a crowd or something. While at the supermarket, she would see a man fumbling with something or dropping a can, and when she rushed over to help, it would be revealed to be Puppet Master, who is holding a statue of her. Puppet Master forces her back to his apartment, where the Thing and Alicia are, and Alicia's confused, wondering why Ben isn't saying anything to her. Puppet Master makes Susan Storm sit on her chair, and commands her not to create force fields, before putting her statue on the table. He would proceed to monologue about how the Fantastic Four are responsible for all the pain he's been through, but that he's in part grateful as the crash gave him his powers. He discovered them over time, only for Human Torch to interfere when he actually wanted to use them for something useful, getting rid of his old business partner Jacob Reese. Plus he would say how Sue's force field were an unforeseen glitch, but that they are no longer a problem. Philip Masters once again leaves Alicia with one of his puppets while he leaves and makes the Thing go on a rampage. Mr. Fantastic and Human Torch show up to try and stop him, but aren't that effective, though Reed manages to restrain him for a bit. Back at the apartment, Alicia, who would have been horrified by her stepfather's speech, would for the first time kind of understand what was happening with Sue, and what had been happening with Ben. She would break the Sue statue, and the two of them would rush to stop the Thing. Susan is still recovering from the latent commands from Puppet Master, so she would not be able to use her force fields. Johnny asks Alicia where her stepfather could be, and she says that because he left with Ben, and he's been leaving the house so frequently recently, she guesses the puppet has to be near to the person to work, hence why he left Sue's puppet on the table. Johnny would take off and fly around before spotting Philip Masters, the only person not fleeing in horror. Johnny would dive down towards him and chase him, but Puppet Master would pull a gun on a hostage with the arm that is holding the Thing statue being around the civilian's neck. He would again speak about how he hates the Fantastic Four and such, and while he was doing this, Invisible Woman would sneak up on him, grab the gun, and would knock Philip out, letting the hostage go free. The Thing statue would be dropped, and Human Torch would destroy it with a fireball. This all would have been caught on camera, so everyone would know that the Fantastic Four were innocent and such, and the crowds would start cheering for them. The post-credit scene would have Ben walk into Mr. Fantastic's lab, as Reed wanted to talk to him. Reed says that he's made a machine to track powerful energy signatures in space, and thinks that he might be able to extract some cosmic energy to maybe find a way to reverse Ben's condition. Ben says that it's fine, but Reed says that he promised and that he never breaks a promise. So that would be the first movie in the Fantastic Four trilogy, and would have the Four face a very street-level foe. The second movie is called World's End, and as the previous post-credit scene hinted at, it would delve into something a little more cosmic. The movie would open with a small white probe with a blue 4 logo painted on the side, floating in space above Earth and towards a storm of colourful radiation. A hatch would open up, and the probe would start to absorb some of the cosmic space energy. As it started to slowly return to Earth, we would zoom through space and galaxies to the wreckage of a planet, where we would see a character from the comics called Terex the Tamer kneeling on a floating rock. He would be in a conversation with an unseen being about someone tampering with cosmic energy, but instead of the other person speaking back, Terex's eyes would glow a cosmic purple, and as it faded, Terex would say, "If that is what you wish, my master," and we would cut to the title card. Reed and Sue would be in a battered Jeep going down a dusty desert road at night. Sue would ask where they're going, and Reed would say, "Wait and see." He would stop at seemingly a random point, and Sue would get out and immediately gaze up at the night sky, which is filled with stars, and is the most amazing and clear night sky ever. Sue would say it's beautiful, and turn around to see Reed on his knees, a ring in his hand. He would ask Sue to marry him, and she would say a very enthusiastic yes. In the morning, they'd be back at the Baxter building, and would be having breakfast with Johnny and Ben, who are both delighted, but Reed would get an alert that something is entering Earth's atmosphere near Mount Rushmore. The four would head there in the Fantastica, and find Terex the Tamer causing havoc, tearing up the ground and chunks of the mountain, and shouting for the one who tampered with the stars. In his hand, he would be holding the probe that we saw at the start of the movie, but now it is crushed and sparking. Reed would say it was him, and Terex would laugh. They would all begin to fight, and while Terex was thrashing them, with only Thing having much luck against him, Terex would ask Reed why, and Reed would say that is to help cure his friend of his condition. Ben would look a bit hurt, and Terex would say that he could help with that. He would throw away Thing, who was grappling with him, and point his staff at him. Immediately, the rocks would fly from Ben's body, and he would revert back to his human form. Terex would say that his master is coming to devour the earth, and would thank Reed for showing him a planet so rich in life. Sue would ask who his master is, and Terex would say Galactus, before promising to return in 1 week for the final day of the planet. Ben would be angry at Reed and wouldn't know how to feel as he had come to accept his form. But also, Alicia had fallen in love with him when he was the Thing. Alicia's currently on holiday, but she is set to fly back as she had been told the world was ending. Some people filmed the encounter, so many people know that the world is apparently ending in a week, but not everyone believes it, and Reed is promising that he'll find a solution. Sue would promise Ben that it would be okay and that Alicia and her and Johnny and Reed love Ben no matter what. Speaking of Johnny, he would have the biggest subplot of the movie. He wouldn't have been able to do much against Terex, and having Ben and Alicia dating and Reed and Sue engaged, he'd be feeling quite down, so he'd go to a museum exhibit about the original Human Torch, Jim Hammond, who, through a talk with Sue earlier, we would have learned is why he picked the name Human Torch, as Jim Hammond was his childhood hero. The tour guide of the exhibit would be a lady called Frankie Ray, who Johnny gets on well with when she notices him in a hoodie and baseball cap at the back of a crowd and goes to talk to him. They would agree to have coffee together, and during that we would learn that she always wanted to be an astronaut, but ended up working at the museum. Her uncle was Phineas Horton, the creator of the Human Torch, but in an accident when she was younger, involving the chemicals that made Torch, she developed a phobia of fire. But when the museum staff learned she was related to Phineas Horton, she was basically thrown onto the project. Johnny would feel a bit uncomfortable about the fire thing, especially when they went to her apartment later, and while they were kissing each other and such, she would grab his shirt and it would suddenly set on fire, causing her to freak out. Johnny would feel horrible and leave, and would be confused as he usually has his power under control. Reed would be trying to track Galactus's path and would be looking at planets which had seemingly been destroyed at random, and Sue would get a bit annoyed. Not that he's working, but that he's shutting everyone else out and blaming himself. Right on schedule, a week after Terex arrived and left, he would arrive again, this time to New York, to herald the arrival of Galactus and declare the world ended. The Fantastic Four, well, 3 as Ben doesn't have his powers, would go to fight Terex, but would be losing until Frankie Ray stepped in and revealed that she has fire powers as well, which she gained in the accident that made her afraid of fire. She would help them get Terex's staff into Ben's hands, and Ben would be able to use it to restore his powers before breaking the staff, and after that Terex would be defeated easily, and Reed would rush back to his lab in order to finish the device that he and Sue had been working on. Galactus would arrive in person, and would shrink down to the size of a skyscraper, and land in New York to see what the heroes of Earth had done to his herald. He would be just about to ascend again and consume the Earth, when Reed would arrive on the Fantastic Car, and land on a nearby building holding a device he called the Ultimate Nullifier, and he would say that it has the power to wipe anything from existence. Galactus would sense that this is true and would be angry, but would respect Reed. He would promise not to eat Earth, but would say that he needs a new herald now that his old one has been pitifully defeated. Johnny Storm would be about to step forward, when Frankie Ray would volunteer, and say that she's always wanted to travel the stars. She would thank Johnny for everything, and promise that she'd try and visit him if she was allowed, and Johnny would make a joke saying, "Only come back if you're sure your boss won't follow you." The movie would end on a happy note with Reed and Sue's wedding, but the post-credit scene would be much more negative. We would see a desolate wasteland, with lots of wild bug creatures, many of them scrapping and fighting with each other. A slightly more humanoid one would fly through the wasteland and come to a castle. Entering a throne room, in a voice filled with clicks and buzzes, it would tell someone on the throne that a gateway has opened up. So yes, I decided to make the second movie the Galactus one, and I did not include any version of Silver Surfer, instead using his two next most famous heralds, Terex the Tamer and Frankie Ray, who often goes by Nova. The third and final movie in this trilogy would be, in a way, the Avengers movie for Act 1, as you've probably noticed, it only really featured Spider-Man and Fantastic Four movies. The movie would be called Annihilation, and would have Annihilus, ruler of the Negative Zone, as its main villain. Fantastic Four Annihilation would start with a baby shower in the Baxter Building for Reed and Sue, as, since the last movie, Sue has become pregnant. All of the Fantastic Four are there, along with Alicia Masters and some other friends of the family. Before the gender can be revealed, though, a large synthetic grey creature would smash the wall from the outside and climb through. Sue would immediately get to work on getting all of the guests to the elevator, while the others fight this creature, which is speaking but with very limited speech, and says it is called Awesome Android, so Johnny gives it the nickname Andy. Plus, it would be revealed that Andy can copy the powers of the last person he touched, such as his arm becoming rocky when Ben punches him. Reed would notice that the clay-like material around Andy's armpits is a lighter shade of grey, and he would jump and stretch and such in order to punch it. When he applied pressure to the area, Andy would deactivate and shrink to about 3 meters tall, still very big, just not massive. At that point, the Fantastic Four's robot Herbie would rush into the room in a panic and tell Reed that someone has broken into his lab. The Fantastic Four would follow Herbie, and Mr. Fantastic would check all around the room, which is empty, so when I say empty I mean all the stuff's still there, but there are no humans there. But it's obvious that someone has been in there, as papers are flung across the room. Reed would sigh with relief when he saw that the Ultimate Nullifier is still locked in its super high containment chamber, but then he would get nervous when he realizes that some important blueprints went missing. Sue asks him what the problem is, and Reed reveals that months ago, while he was researching Galactus, some of his scans picked up on another dimension parallel to their own, and that in secret, after Galactus had left, he worked on making a portal to this strange dimension he coined the Negative Zone. Reed says he built in radiation screening and force fields to stop anyone or anything from coming through, and that it was purely for research purposes and out of curiosity. At first he'd just seen a wasteland full of terrible creatures, but soon he was met by their leader, a creature that calls itself Annihilus, and wields a staff he calls the Cosmic Control Rod, that contains an immense amount of power. We would see all of this in a flashback as he spoke, but we wouldn't get a proper look at Annihilus. Reed would insist that he closed the portal and destroyed the machine, but when Johnny asked what the problem was, Mr. Fantastic would admit that he kept the plans. Sue would be disappointed that Reed didn't tell them, especially after she had the talk with him last movie about not shutting people out. Johnny would just be annoyed that he didn't get to go to the cool post-apocalyptic wasteland. Reed would then bring up security footage, and we would see a man who they'd identify as the Mad Thinker taking the blueprints. We'll later see Mad Thinker in a warehouse opening a portal to the Negative Zone with the machine that he's built. Annihilus would arrive and would this time be able to use the Cosmic Control Rod to burst open the force fields and unleash his Annihilation Wave, basically a gigantic army of massive bugs, into New York. When the shields were opened, Mad Thinker would have been hit by some heavy blasts of radiation, and Annihilus would pick him up by the throat and say something to him about bringing annihilation before throwing him into a heap in the corner. As the Annihilation Wave was unleashed on New York, we would see Peter Parker walking through the streets with Gwen Stacy, and it would be revealed that she's basically come to terms with him being Spider-Man. See my Spider-Man video for more details. There would be lots of fighting in the city, and Spider-Man would meet up with the Fantastic Four at one point, as he's basically the only other well-known costumed superhero in the city at the time. Annihilus would see Sue protecting a bunch of citizens at one point, and we would get a POV shot from him seeing that, to him, Sue's belly is radiating lots of cosmic energy. The ruler of the negative zone would fly down to Invisible Woman and would knock her out with his cosmic control rod, before picking her up and flying her to the negative zone. Reed would have called for a rendezvous, and while Spider-Man would arrive with Human Torch, Sue wouldn't come, and when he arrived, Ben would say that he saw Annihilus take her and fly off with her. Plus, most of the Annihilation Wave would have followed Annihilus back, but a few would still be attacking the city. Reed would take the other heroes back to the Baxter building. On the way, he would say that their original suits are designed to absorb radiation, but that they are not built for long-time exposure, so they'd have to use new ones. He would show them new black and white suits, based on their future Foundation looks from the comics, and it would be revealed that he even has one for Spider-Man, which he made in advance, since Johnny told him about the time he met Spider-Man. Reed had been considering asking Spidey to be an honorary member. Reed would track down the signal from the portal, and when they got to the warehouse, they'd find Mad Thinker barely clinging to life and scarred by radiation. They'd call an ambulance for him, but then would head straight into the negative zone to go and rescue Invisible Woman. Reed would obviously be very nervous about his wife and child. He was already worried about the baby given the cosmic energy present in all of the Fantastic Four, and would say that he hopes that the current suit Sue has will protect her and the baby for long enough. Sue would wake up and find herself lying on a table or desk thing in Annihilus's throne room. She would instantly create a skin layer force field around herself, but would feel something was wrong with the baby. She would ask Annihilus what he's done, but he would say that she is just lucky that her baby absorbed most of the radiation. Sue would be horrified, but Annihilus would say that the baby was not in any danger of harm, and basically, that he wants to feast on the baby and consume all of his energies, which would grant him unlimited power. Reed, Johnny, Ben, and Peter would burst in to rescue Sue, and they would all battle Annihilus before managing to return to the portal and shut it down before Annihilus could follow. Mad Thinker would have been rushed to the hospital, and Sue would follow as she'd basically be going into early labor. The movie would end with Franklin Richards being born and named, and Reed would basically say that no matter what powers he has, he is their son and they will protect him no matter what. In the post-credit scene, we would see a robed figure watching the events of the movie on the news, and he would lean forwards, revealing silver armored arms and a green hood. The man would whisper, "Richards," and it would cut to black. If you have made it this far, then thank you, and if you've enjoyed it, I'd recommend subscribing or at least ringing the notifications bell to receive updates on my newest videos. While, as you can see, there is still one movie in Act 1 that I haven't covered, that will not be the focus of the next video. Instead, the next video will focus on a movie trilogy from Act 2 of the MMU, focusing on Marvel's biggest property that I have not yet mentioned. That's right, in the next video I will be going over how the X-Men fit into this new universe. After that, I'll touch on the last movie of Act 1 and the corresponding movie in Act 2. And by the way, the last movie in Act 1 was actually teased in this, so congratulations if you managed to figure out what it is, before going over the rest of the Act 2 movies. That's all for now, folks. Have a good day and ta-ta.